we're home. I love
It,
that it gives you a doorbell to say you're in your own house. It's like, well, there's where I left me. Who hasn't been there, huh?
mhm.
There we go. Okay. We are in. Welcome, welcome everybody to today's eat and greet. And man, what a good title you came up with. Sex, love, crazy. People are like, two, please. I'd like two of those, right? Just a good title can just pull you in and drive so much interest of how is that going, what's working, what's happening in my chart, what does this all mean? So hopefully you guys are excited to come and talk about Venus and the outer planets and see how this impacts relationships, how we show up in relationships. And we've got one of the most amazing tour guides, I think, for the topic. Miss Kay Taylor is visiting with us today. So thank you so much, Kay, for coming over to the Cyber House.
Thank you for inviting me, Stormy. I'm really excited to be here.
Yay. And
Mhm.
it's funny because as we go through and people are showing up for interviews, I keep reminding people that all I've done is just go and ask people and create the invitation. So if you're trying to expand out there, just ask. You never know who's gonna say yes. And you said yes. And I was like, victory.
Mm,
And so
yeah.
we've got some good heart-centered astrology we're going to talk about today, and it's so great. You can't see them, but I can. And down in the comment section already, we've got people with clapping hands. So I feel like you're welcome here.
Oh, well, that's great. I so appreciate it. Yeah, relationship has been a big deal in my life, going back to before I was a professional astrologer, before I really understood the deeper nature of astrology. And then I found, I was having my own challenges, and I was having astrologers say pretty negative things to me,
Mm.
like, you will always be disappointed in love. I heard that more than once. And you probably get into relationships and think they're going to go well, and then you find that it's not so great, and you're working too hard, and on and on and on. And then as I started working professionally with clients, then I started to see relationship patterns with them again and again, break up with somebody and then move on with somebody else who was almost like the same story.
Mhm.
So at a certain point in time, I drug out all my files and started running things on a spreadsheet to see what aspects people had and what their relationships are like. And I've been doing this work now as a professional psychic channel, astrologer, healer. I mix a lot of energetic work into what I do. I've been doing it now professionally for 36 years.
Mhm.
And because a lot of people liked working with me regularly, I have a lot of the same clients that I've had for 20, 25, 35 years. And I've watched them go through their lives. I know them in detail. Sometimes I see people weekly or every couple of weeks. Other people are more like typical astrology readings and come once a year or so. But overall, this many years of experience, I know, like, I'll have done the reading for a person, her husband, her ex, her children, her friends. Like, at a
Right.
certain point in time, I know everybody, and that's in any way related. And that's also helpful when you start to see, like, someone's talking about their marriage, and you see it in the chart, and you see one thing, but then they send in their partner, and you meet that person and you see the way they are in their chart, and you see the way that they speak about their partner. So the experience, all that personal experience, has made a really big difference to how I see the astrology.
Yeah. And some good old life experience, I think, changes the way that everyone practices or even just engages with life in general. But you were talking about that next place where there's more depth in astrology, beyond just learning the signs and the placements and all of those things. And I think that life adds its own flavor of depth to everything in this particular arena.
Yes, well, absolutely. You learn a lot from books. You learn a lot of the basics and how many people experience things. But when you sit with people and you get to know them and you start to see the nuance and then the choices, right? That we see that we have a lot of proactive, co-creative choice in what we do with the astrology. And one of my main issues with astrology is that it can be handled in a very predictive, simplistic way. And we've all done it. Like we were all beginners at one point, so no shaming anybody. But when we start out and we read this means that and that means this, and we assume that that always means that, and when we don't even understand in the beginning all the ways other planets are interacting and the progress chart and what that means, so we can have a flat disempowering view of life and people through astrology sometimes. And I believe that it's very, very important that we move outside of that overly judgmental or predictive negative realm and focus on what the positive is, what the true integrated meaning is of every planet in every sign with every aspect configuration. And when we know what it is we're going for, then we understand the like what we're not getting yet, where the problems are. And so I see astrology sometimes like an x-ray. It's the diagnosis. And from that diagnosis of what the positive potential is, like say healthy lungs and heart is what we're trying to get for. And then we see that, oh no, there's some darkness here, there's some problems, it's congenital for you, you have the uh, what's the word, the genetic syndrome for it, right? I think astrology sort of pulls in that genetic piece on a personal level. And we see, oh, well, this is what you could possibly have unless you do this, this, and this. And if you do this and this, then you get the health. And so I make a point always of trying to focus on the positive integrated outcome with everything. Like this is what you're going for. And this is the possible difficulty you could have, and this is the steps so that you can move through that with grace.
Yeah, that is so lovely. Especially since we are all here to do things. There's work to get done. It's why we're here. There's experiences to be had. So instead of being able to avoid them and pretend they're not going to happen, or we don't have these default positionings in some of them, better to understand them and be offered a different choice and how to engage it.
Yes, yes. And I've especially found this with relationship issues, because obviously relationship is near and dear to most of our hearts. And I want to say some people, some people don't care so much about relationship. And that's becoming one of the choices in modern days, that we're saying, hey, don't assume everybody is heterosexual. Don't assume everybody actually wants a relationship. So we see that we have a lot of possible choices, but many people do want a relationship. And by the time, if you've got these difficult relationship configurations in your chart, by the time you're through your teens and your 20s, many people are starting to feel really discouraged. They're starting to feel like my picker is broken. I can't choose anybody good. Relationships never turn out for me. And it gets discouraging and frustrating.
Yeah. So, in your practice, before we jump in, I'm just wondering, with the experiences that you've had in 36 years, where do you find that intersection between astrology and faith in relationships?
Astrology and faith in relationships?
Yeah. And so, what I mean by that is, in my practice, mine is an astrology practice that tells you, maybe look at that faith foundation. What do you really fall into? What are you working with over there? What is the thing that is the guiding force for you? Because you can have the best astrology, challenging astrology, whatever else, but if you don't have enough trust and faith to go see that play out, to make a different choice, to engage it, where do you fall? So I don't know if you have anything like that in your practice.
Hmm, I would say I have not thought about it in that way so specifically. And I'm wishing right now I had your chart right in front of me so I could see how faith and trust like lines up for you in relationship in some way. Uh, but I would say that helping people develop faith and trust in the process is something that I'm actively doing. That to understand that if you do the healing, integration, and understanding work that you need to do, your life will play out and your relationships will be what they're meant to be. That too often, in general, I would say too often people settle for very difficult relationships, and it's
Sure.
because they don't know any better. I
Mhm.
can certainly say that that was true for me, that I feel that there were many, long-term relationships that I felt from the first date were not that good. And yet the karma was operating and pushing me toward it. And then I would go in, I would spend many years trying to make something work that was somewhat incompatible at a base.
Mhm.
And so now that I'm in a really great relationship and have been for almost 11 years now, which also means, it's pretty late in life that I met
Right.
this partner. But it doesn't matter. I'll just tell all you youngins out there that, you don't stop wanting to be in relationship and be intimate and connected no matter how old you get. So sometimes I have people come to me for a reading who are 88, 90 years old, and their spouse has died and they're looking for a partner. They want one last partner before they go. So we are, again, such relational beings that we have time to get it right.
We have time. I know. I love that. That is my favorite piece of grace that I think that the universe gives us is time. You have some time to figure it out. Don't worry. If you're supposed to have a partner, you're not going to fall off this planet without one. Promise.
Mhm.
That's good news. Awesome. So everybody's saying hi and saying hello to you. So just kind of welcoming you in. But I'm ready. Let's get in here. Let's talk about Venus. Let's talk about these outer planets. Let's talk about not going to crazy astrologers who tell you you're broken for life. I have
Oh
Venus
yes,
in Aries.
I had somebody come to me who'd been to an astrologer. She was only 24 years old, and the astrologer told her she would never have a romantic relationship in her whole life.
Mm,
It's just heartbreaking when you hear things like that.
yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is. I know. And I can tell you that I was sitting with Spencer Michaud, and I have Venus in Aries, and it opposes my Mars. Thank God they're a mutual reception. But it's so funny, after I'd done all of this learning and all of this changing around Venus and really gotten into the work of that, he's like, "Oh, did you spend a long time just kind of going to get things and then you got it and didn't want it anymore?" And I was like, "Ugh, yeah, only like everything back there, and learning and talking through with him that it's like, that's kind of what that lower or less mature expression of that placement can be. But once I came to the other side and learning that actually that Venus, especially through the lens of traditional astrology, is like, I'm going to aggressively allow things to come to me. Watch. And
Mhm. Mhm.
every that changed an entire thought process because I was one of my pickers brokens, right? Like I am just clearly not going
Mhm.
to get this. But I also am one of those people, Kay. I also have Saturn in Libra. And I was like, Saturn, we got to get it together because mama's looking for a relationship and I need one that's not crazy.
That's so great. That's so great. Well, I'll share also. I have Venus in Aries also on the ascendant. And I have seen myself arguing with someone that I wanted to split up with, arguing to save the relationship. Like, it's like that warrior spirit, we're going to make it work. We're going to do it. We're going to start anew. And yet I'd be watching myself saying all these things and knowing that really it would be such a relief to be out of the relationship. So you have to watch that Venus in Aries because it will just really fight for something just to win.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have the other parts of you integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So before we come into talking about the relationship, I'll just mention that I am an evolutionary astrologer at my core. So when I'm talking about all of these planetary configurations, I'm always coming from the past life perspective. And if people are listening and they don't believe in past lives or they don't care about past lives, just translate that in your mind to these qualities are at the core of you, right? Is the past life energy to me represents deeper awareness, deeper patterns that we have that are different than the psychological and personality patterns that we have just for this incarnation, where it's just what helps us accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Yeah. We're
Okay.
from the same
And as I'm opening
evolutionary
this
soul
up, I
tribe.
will also, what did you say? I'm sorry.
We're from the same evolutionary little soul tribe. We both came from Stephen's work, which is
From Stephen Forrest. Yes. Yay,
yay.
Stephen.
Yay,
Yeah.
Stephen. Yeah, we've had him here too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that's partly why I agreed for your invitation. I took a look at all the great astrologers you were already talking to, and it's like, wow, you're getting like major people to come and talk to your audience, which is so cool.
I know. I feel like we're just super blessed over here that people see something valuable and we get to experience what you guys have seen for years in practice. And yay, that's a big deal, I think.
Yeah.
Ooh, look, guys, we're on the screen. Sex, love, crazy.
Okay. So, to tell you why sex love crazy right away, just because, yes, relationships can be that way. But the sex stands for Pluto, the love stands for Neptune, and the crazy stands for Uranus. And each one of these transpersonal planets, as they connect to Venus, will have their own special sauce, right, that you have to deal with. I want to say, just coming into this, that relationship signatures include the whole chart, actually. Like everything about us is relational. But Venus and aspects to the outer planets and Moon and aspects to the outer planets are two signatures that I have found to be the most significant. And it, even though if they are also in relationship houses, they are stronger. I have found that even if they're not in the specific romantic relationship houses, that they still are very significant in their impact on romance. The fourth house is home and family. But if you think about it, when you get involved with somebody, you want to make home with them if you think it's a long-term relationship. So there's the nature of evaluation of partners where we say, would I want to live with this person? Would I want to bring this person home to meet my family? Do I want to have children or cats or dogs with this person? And then we have the fifth house, which we all think of as relationship, romantic, sexual, playful, pleasurable. Seventh house, partnership and marriage. And eighth house, intimate bonding, going into the depths. So seventh house, we begin to create an equal relationship and develop trust. If we go deeper with a person, then the eighth house becomes very significant. I also feel the nodal structure is very important in relationship. And when I'm counseling couples, I will use the nodal structure of each person to see how the partner supports or sabotages naturally the other person and their evolutionary goal. Because if you if you're not supporting your partner in their evolutionary journey, excuse me, there will be a fundamental karmic issue in the relationship. And many times we get involved with somebody who has significant planets on our south node, which represents who we are on a soul level, the kind of karmic past we've had. It carries all of our gifts and benefits, but it also carries our stuck points. So we have to be careful that we'll feel a really strong soul level connection most often with someone who has planets at the south node. But if we're not careful, they might keep us in some of our old patterns, and we have to be attuned to that. And the partner needs to be attuned to that. You know, your partner needs to know what your north node is and what the ruler of your north node is. And if they don't have any planets that help you with that, they can specifically, deliberately encourage you in that direction. So for instance, an example would be if a person has a Libra South Node and therefore their evolutionary goal is to develop more independence, more Aries energy, that's going to maybe be a little bit confrontational or worrisome to a partner. It's like if I keep telling, my partner that they need to do things by themselves, am I going to break our sense of connection? And yet that person with the North Node in Aries must do that to be happy in their relationship. Naturally, the asteroids define a lot of the details about relationship. And I wanted, before we really can't come into this, to make a very special point about ethics. Because we're going to be talking about some intimate, important, often painful issues in people's lives when we start looking at these outer planets in Venus. And we need to remember that when we're looking at these signatures, we have these signatures when we're born, before we even start our life. So they are clearly coming from something. I think they're coming from past life unresolved issues. Maybe they're coming just from our core level internal soul sense. But these energies are already there. And then we have our childhood experiences that imprint us. The way our parents' marriage was, if we're abused in some way, our first romances, the terrible things that happened to us in high school when nobody knows what they're doing. So we have the imprinting. And these two things go together to start to create our patterns and how we engage in relationship. But if we do healing, if we are conscious and we do therapy and we have support people around us to talk about things, no matter how difficult that astrological signature is about relationship, we have a good chance to heal. And it's just a matter of time. And some people find a way to do the healing and move into higher expressions of their relationship planets fairly early. And other people don't. They wait till their 30s, 40s, or older, and then finally they do it. But I want to make sure that when we're talking about such sensitive material, that people don't just think you can look at the chart and go, oh, you've got this, and that means you're going to be unfaithful, and your partner has this, and this means that they've got this big problem, and they will, never really be with you. That kind of, negative astrology that gets thrown around. So we need to remember that the consciousness of the person and how they're operating through the chart is always number one. That's always really important. And so if we're talking to somebody about their chart, we need to question and explore with compassion how this is operating for them. So if someone comes in and they say, I've been married for 20 years and it's really healthy and happy, even though they have a challenging configuration for relationship, I will assume their consciousness and their healing has brought them to this place. And I'm not going to say, oh, well, you better watch out, which has happened to me, where somebody has said, oh, well, this is happening. You're getting an eclipse to this. That means you're going to find out that your partner's unfaithful. It's like, I'm not going to say those things if they are, feeling that things are good. Whereas if somebody comes in and they have these signatures and they're talking about the challenges, I'm with somebody, they live in another country, they're also married, when are we going to get together? Then I'm going to focus on the challenges and what it would take to heal this. Sure. I'm sure that makes sense to you, Stormie, doesn't it?
110%. In that place of, just ethics is huge as we're growing it in the astrology community right now anyways, and what that really looks like. And as we do, like, we don't just come and see if you're going to win the lotto. These are big soul questions, and they feel heavy sometimes. They feel vulnerable. So the ethics in general, I think, is just so huge here. So
Yes.
huge. Just like in any other industry. Yeah, I have had a reading where someone told me that because it happened in my past life, I brought it in on purpose.
Yes.
I'm like, well, I mean, as a relatively sound human being, I don't generally look around and say, let me make myself miserable. So to meet someone with that kind of attitude in astrology, and if that's the best you've got at the time and you don't know that you can present it differently, I'm sure each of us have done that or said something in a way that was less supportive. And but today we look at that under, the ethical goggles and we go, okay, hold on. That could have been better, right?
Yeah, I mean, like doctors, first, do no harm.
Do
You
no
know, that
harm.
is so important, no harm. And taking people's power away, limiting their possibilities, trying to tell them that something is always going to be a certain way and there's no way to integrate to a more healthy way, I feel is very, very harmful.
Yeah, I agree. Ethics, friends. Ethics.
Yes.
Darn it.
And I want to say here too that going back to what you just said is that we have to make a really big distinction between soul choices and human choices. And I think this is one of the places that it becomes very wounding is that people feel like they're being told they're bad and shameful because they have these patterns and they haven't solved them yet. And to understand that the soul being beautiful and perfect and all powerful, comes into a life wanting to resolve something where something got stuck in another life, that is not about the human choice, and that the human ego part of us is literally doing the best we can all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful.
So, of course, we all know Venus is about the capacity to attract and maintain relationships, romantic and other. It also has other qualities related to resources and artistry and all of that. And the moon, a little bit different, but also very engaged in relationship. We usually, if it's a romantic relationship, we come into it under Venus. And then once we start to get a little bit secure, the point in time where we start to get to know a person, we're really deciding if they're going to be the one. I feel like that's when the moon kicks in. That's when our childhood issues, our needs for security and safety show up. And this is where we decide if somebody is really going to be an unconditionally loving person and not just a romantically loving person, because romantic has conditions, right? We have our I will love you in this way if you don't see anybody else, or if you tell me if you're going to see somebody else, or all the other rules we put around Venus. But moon is where our hearts speak to each other.
Yeah. And I
Now,
find too that like in that moon energy, like if my moon is not being fed, I'm going to start to make some just emotional decisions because I'm not nourished here. And in relationships, that can start to look real interesting as opposed to a moon that's fed. Then the ability to
yeah,
be the moon and be safe in relationship looks much different.
much different. And when we feel safe in our relationship, we truly do go in to heal those childhood patterns and soul level patterns, because the moon is really the emissary of the heart and soul.
Yeah. Oh, yay. I'm in already.
Now, when we start connecting Venus with its personal orientation toward relationship, with transpersonal planets that have this capacity to transform the world. Remember, when the transpersonal planets were first discovered, at first astrologers argued about whether they would even have any place in interpreting a personal chart. But we could see very quickly that each planet does, in fact, affect us, and especially if they are connected by aspect to a personal planet. So Neptune represents oneness and the urge to merge with the divine. And it's all about transcendence and ego dissolution. And really, this is the part of us that seeks a soulmate, where we're going to feel love beyond love, and we want to do it with a person.
Mm. Yeah, and I
Ah,
have Pisces on the descendant. I've been out here. I'm like, where is my soulmate? I've been looking for you since I was like 10. Where the F are you? Get it
Yeah.
together.
Yes, yes. Having Neptune in the seventh house or Pisces on the seventh house cusp absolutely predisposes you to that desire for that huge soul centered connection.
Mhm.
And
And
so, if our Venus Neptune is evolved, that's what we find. We find a conscious spiritual relationship with absolute unconditional love. We connect to transcendent artistry, maybe philanthropy, um, and we experience that oneness and bliss through the relationship. If we're on that middle level, we have more of a codependent relationship, poor boundaries. We could be overly forgiving. And what I really notice with people with Venus Neptune is that they value the psychic connection with a person so much that they overlook the non compatibility. And when you have Venus Neptune, and by the way, I always have people say, well, is it the same if you have Venus and Pisces? And I would say yes. It's a little bit like the conjunction in terms of the aspect. It's fairly well integrated, but it definitely has these qualities. That there is, with the Venus Neptune is um, this capacity to see who people are on a soul level and
mhm.
love them in this deep unconditional way. And that's an amazing thing if you do any kind of healing work, if you're a psychotherapist or an astrologer or a healer, anything where to see a person and let them feel that is fantastic for them and fantastic for the process. But if it is unevolved, low, dysfunctional, there we get the classic challenge Venus Neptune, which is that the relationships are with people who are unavailable. Maybe they have addictions or dependencies. You feel like you're falling in love with your soulmate when you're in another relationship. So affairs, there can be affairs with any Venus outer planet aspect. But with Neptune, it's usually because the person falls in love with somebody. It's not because they just want sex. It's not as crazy as we'll get to with Uranus, but it's the feeling like, oh, I thought I was with my soulmate, but now I've met another soulmate. And again, when we remember that when we have Venus Neptune, we're capable of this soul-centered connection. We have to get harsh with ourselves and draw in Saturn and say, I need to be realistic about this person. I need to set boundaries and trust that there are many, many souls that I'm capable of having a soul-centered connection with.
Yeah, that is my direct lived experience because I feel like I've been up and down this descending energy where truly I had a person in my world who it was that immediate pull into each other. And I was able to love his potential, love
Mm-hmm.
the healing that hadn't happened for him. And in the physical world, I could not align those things. And he was all of the other things. And I can remember, though, Kay, truly getting into Saturn. That's what it was. My
Mm-hmm.
Saturn in Libra. And I said, show me the reality of what's here. And that was the answer was you got a soul tie here, but this person's not ready. Promise we'll bring you another one where you can do the evolved version, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's a place as human beings where that soul tie to another person, that pull can feel like it's never going to be possible again,
Yes.
right? Like this
Oh,
will
that is
never.
so true. Because when we're in that
Oh,
space, it feels like they're the only one and we're just
yes.
merged, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And the actual choice, the actual phrase that came out of my mouth at the end of that work was, I just don't choose you this time.
Mm-hmm.
And everything got to be different. So if that's you out there, it's really real. And you will be offered an evolved version if you're willing to take it. And if you
Yes.
evolve as well. Mm,
Yes. And I have also done the meditation practice of facing somebody that I'm in relationship with in meditation and saying to them, I love you unconditionally and I will be with you in another lifetime when we're compatible.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that allows that heart-centered, soul-centered connection to remain, but to set the boundary for this incarnation where they're unable to show up in a way that makes sense for a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I heard someone describe this. I know we'll move on, but I heard someone describe it like this, and I thought this was an interesting perspective. But they said, "Have you ever met the person you're supposed to do soul work, and they show up unprepared for the job, and you're kind of pissed?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, yes, I have definitely had that experience where I'm like, hey." That is not what we agreed on. I need you to just get your
Mhm.
life together. And really, the answer was never, I need you to get your life together. It comes back home, which is like, I can see that I need to adjust because this is not what we agreed to. And that's the evolution point, I think, for us, right? Like, I get to
Yeah,
make different choices.
indeed, indeed.
Hmm.
Because it always comes to us, right?
Always.
Everybody in our life is a player in our movie. And so if we have a problem, turning the lens toward ourselves and what we're doing is always the answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yep. People are resonating down here. They're like, yep. Yep, been in the middle, been low. Right, there's nothing wrong with that either. Saying, yeah, I've definitely had the low experience of that. Because how do you evolve if you can't say I've been on the lower end of that pole?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
Tina.
So Tina Turner, and I love using her as an example because she was so brave and courageous telling her story, right? With What's Love Got to Do with It, whole movie made about her and her, abusive relationship she was in with Ike Turner for so many years. And here you see the classic Venus Neptune signature, and also in a T square with Jupiter in Pisces as well. And the Jupiter is in the eighth house of intimate bonding. The Venus is in the fifth house of performance and romance. And so, she has a very challenging Venus configuration here. And it was discovering Buddhism and chanting that changed her life and allowed her finally the strength to leave. And that's very classic because one of the things that I talk about, and I'll talk about it in general more toward, the end of looking at these charts about how to work with the healing process with the Venus signatures, is that if we have a way to siphon off the energy, that's my theory. You've got to find positive expressions for this energy because literally this much Neptune in Pisces is too much for poor Venus. And you're just putting all that energy on, like one person is supposed to be your major spiritual experience. So with Venus Neptune, you definitely need a spiritual path. You need meditation, you need chanting. She already is in a good shape here because she is a singer, and so she's using the creative artistry of both Venus and Neptune. So she had that to put it toward. Taking care of other people who are suffering in an appropriate way, being part of organizations. This is a way to work with the Venus Neptune energy so that one poor human other person isn't in charge of your spiritual vibration for a whole incarnation.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just tired thinking about all that.
And then I thought about Drew Barrymore. She's another one who's so Piscean, and she's had a lot of ups and downs of relationship, a lot of relationships that seemed like just like you could just see her when she meets somebody and she blossoms, and then usually a year, 2 years later, it comes to an end.
Yeah.
And so we see her with Venus in Pisces conjunct Jupiter in Pisces, so it's expanded. And then we have a quincunx to Uranus, and it's in the area of romance. So the relationship's coming and going more quickly. And then we also have Pluto in a square to Moon Saturn. And, we'll talk obviously more about Uranus and Pluto in a minute. But this often happens, I find, in charts where someone is like well known for having a lot of relationship ups and downs, that they have Venus in aspect to a couple of outer planets. They have Moon in aspect to a couple of outer planets. Maybe Jupiter's there blowing things up. And so it definitely takes time for them to work with the healing process.
Sure. And Uranus in Scorpio is quicker moving just in his
Yes.
orbit. So it's like
Yes.
the relationship vortex would definitely do that. Now, if she'd had a Uranus in Taurus, it'd be a little bit slower, but still probably all the same symptoms, you think?
Yes,
Should
yes, it
that
would
have
be.
been the
I mean,
configuration?
it's more intense because it's Scorpio and it's ruled by Pluto, and Pluto's there also in the fifth house.
Mm,
And yeah, if it was Uranus in Taurus, probably there would be a little bit slower, grounded energy. But you add this to her incredible water signature. And I
sure.
would even add that the South Node in Gemini is someone who has been relationship oriented in the past, and coming into the healing medicine of Sagittarius, she has to learn to be alone and enjoy being alone. But it's a mixed message because she has Neptune on the North Node. So she's longing for that oneness state, and she's going to long for it through partnership.
Mm. All right, Drew. I'm feeling you.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of Uranus, representing the urge for awakening and enlightenment, or at least a sense of individuality and personal freedom. And with Uranus, we break outside the box, we march to our drummer, we do things that are correct for us. And when we mix it with Venus, we will find that at the evolved level, our relationships are the vehicle for awakening. We learn to be authentic in the relationship. We have a sense that we can be ourselves, and ideally we use the relationship as, true spiritual awakening, in the way of, I think of Adyashanti or Krishnamurti as teachers that have taught us over the years to know what it's like to be awake and to understand who we are on a soul level. So that's the highest level of what we might look for with a partner. But what often happens in the early years, of course, is that we're in relationships where we might feel unsettled or unsure about the relationship. People with Venus, Uranus are never quite sure whether they're going to stay or not. It's really easy to feel like if there's an abandonment possibility, there's a little insecurity that I need to cut and run. So at the lowest levels of Venus, Uranus, you see relationships that just start quickly and end quickly, or there's disruption and turmoil, and they break up and come back together again. Or even sometimes it's managed by having a partner who travels a lot.
Sure.
And so the person comes and goes. But you can usually see that unless the evolved energies are happening and both people feel like they can be free and individuated in the relationship, whether it's a monogamous or polyamorous relationship, that if it's evolved, then the two people could settle in more fully. And I do find that many people with Venus Uranus signatures gravitate toward more freedom in
Yeah.
relationships. And of
Yeah.
course, my first example here is Russell Brand. And when I'm preparing for something like this, I will sort of chart my case and say, okay, these are the signatures I'm going to look at, and then I'll think to myself, who's a good example of this, without even knowing their chart. And I thought, well, Russell Brand must be Venus Uranus, just from what I know about him. And of course, the story of him and Katy Perry was they met, a couple of months later, they married. Very shortly after that, he sent her a text to divorce her, and then they never spoke after that. And
And
that's about as
married her on an
Venus
elephant.
Uranus as you can get, right?
Yeah, and he married her on an elephant.
He
Let's
married her
just
on an elephant, yes.
really bring it in. It's brilliant.
So we see that he has a very tight square. of Venus Uranus, with Venus in the house of partnership and Uranus in the 8th house, intimate bonding. And we also see that Moon in Aries conjunct Mars and Jupiter is a signature for being very, very fast, right? And being impulsive and, gut feel, I'm going to go for it. And of course, that moon is opposite Pluto as well. So, he talks not only what happened with Katy Perry, but he talks about his relationship life and how wild he was and how many different people he slept with. And this is a great chart for that. And we also see now that he's moved more and more deeply into yoga and spirituality and wanting to be someone who's part of the changes of the world. So he is using his Venus Uranus energy, which at a high level can also connect to activist orientation and being a change agent in the world. He's definitely doing his best now to get out there in the world as a teacher.
Yeah, and I love that, to see the evolution of a Sagittarius North Node like that. I tend to, my experience, my clients is that those people go really do it wrong or do it challenging first. And then it's like, oh, well, I have all this wisdom because I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can maybe offer something different, just beautiful expression of that placement.
Yes, yes. And then, of course, you wonder, well, what about Katie, right? And she has a very intense chart with Venus conjunct Uranus. And then in that whole stellium with Venus and the South Node in Scorpio in this gigantic train that includes Neptune and Jupiter and Pluto. And I know one of the things that Russell Brand said about her was that she was the most controlling person he'd ever met. And is this not a chart for someone controlling? And of course, how this has been a gift for her in her major accomplishments. I mean, she knew what she was going for and she went for it. And, along the way, she jumped into this relationship with him as well.
Mm-hmm. And I just have this sense with the two of them that it is exactly what both of them described, that almost upon impact, they were like merged in that soul place that was like, yeah, deep merging. But then in everyday life, it was like, hold on, we're not going to do the same things here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which, how startling, honestly. Well, and a text is just crap. That wasn't great.
No, that was not well done from our polite perspectives. You
Sure.
with your Libra, me with Venus on the ascendant. No, we would have to at least write an email.
Yeah, something. Well, and they showed, I don't know if you were able to see it, but in the documentary, they were showing her tour, and they showed that she's in the middle of tour. She gets this text, and you can watch the Scorpio fall because you could just see everything in her. If you tear that deep melding from Scorpio energy, especially intensely, it is a fall. And in the eighth house, we're falling. That is the nature of that house. We're taking a big fall. So, man, to see her chart play out in that moment was more than hurt. It was a fall. Oh, I just remember
Wow.
seeing that. That was so impactful to me. Just seeing, I'm like, oh, she's not heartbroken. This is a fall. Mm.
Um,
But now she's married and having a baby. So,
yeah,
yay.
yeah. So
Yay for
hopefully
that.
she found somebody that brings her into that Taurus North Node, right, where she can have the security and stability of a true deep partner and put all of her energies toward her creativity.
I think Orlando is a Taurus.
Ah,
I'll have to look, but I think he is a Taurus.
well, that's often a good sign when we can be with somebody who helps us go to our North Node.
It's on the way, right?
So I wanted to bring up Holly Berry also because she's another one who has had some difficult challenges. You remember, oh gosh, what was his name? Her partner who really he got treated for sex addiction. I mean, it turned out he was really cheating on her intensely. I lost his name in the whole story of it, because I was hoping after that experience for her that things got better. But reading her bio for this lecture, it just seems like she's still with somebody like every 2 years, every 1 year, that she hasn't found that one yet. But you can see that in her chart that there's quite a balancing that she's working on. She's coming in with a Scorpio South Node. So that in a way is a little bit, Scorpio South Node in the seventh house is a little bit like Pluto Venus. And it's right next to Neptune. So it's a little bit like Venus Neptune. And then when we come down to the bottom of the chart, we see that, Venus is in Cancer. So in a trine to the South Node Neptune, wide trine. But for these purposes, I will tell you that I use up to maybe 10 degrees for these patterns. But if it's at 10 degrees, it's usually a little softer and more subtle as a pattern, versus if it's like the orb is like, 1 degree or less, like where it's very, very intense. So, I kind of, it's fuzzier and more mergy, blendy at this level. But it's also important to me that the Venus so close to the IC, the bottom of the chart, so much of her foundation is about love, both Venus and the moon, and the desire for romance is very, very strong.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Neptune by the descendant too. Like it's kind of doing that same little dance right there. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Hallie.
Mm-hmm.
She just always
Yeah.
finds the most attractive people, though. I will give her that. I'm like, girl, you got her eyeballs are broke. That we know, right? Like those guys are
That is,
on point.
oh, that is so true.
Yay. So far people are like, yes. Oh, Eric Benet was his name.
Oh, Eric Benet, that's right. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, because everybody was astonished by that, right? Like men all over the world were like, if you had her at home, why would you go for somebody else, right?
Yeah,
And that's really, what it comes down to too, is that it doesn't matter whether someone is, beautiful, or we get along with them. If someone is inclined toward cheating, they're going to do it no matter who they're with. So it's a deeper process than just, oh, I want somebody better looking.
sure.
um,
Mm.
and so here we have Rihanna, and I thought about her because I remember reading her being interviewed about Chris Brown and saying that even though he was the way he was and he beat her up, and things that she would forgive him, she would go back to him. And I don't know if she continued along those ideas, but that is very classic Venus Neptune. And you see she's got the hard square with the moon and Venus to Neptune.
Yeah. Ooh,
And she is also a Pisces, and so that Neptune is ruling her sun, and the sun, of course, is responsible for choices. And uh, talking for a moment just about aspects, let me say this: that the hard aspects, like squares and oppositions, in my experience, uh, create or affiliated with more difficult experiences around these relationship indicators, and take a little bit more work to heal. But like all squares and oppositions, when we finally do heal them, we're really strong with them, and
mhm.
it's really fabulous. But to know that if you have squares or oppositions, that you will need to do more specific work, most likely. Whereas if somebody has Venus in trine or sextile to the outer planets, I find that there's already a little bit more integration. But being integrated with Pluto is still Pluto. So it's not like a trine between Venus and Pluto is a walk in the park.
Right.
There's still going to be the intensity of that Plutonian energy engaged in your relationships.
Yeah. And I have this Venus Neptune square.
Mm-hmm.
This self love, not the victim. peace is that's a real accepting kind of placement until you get it together. I'll tell you. Now, on the other side of that, too, once you get it together, it's like, no, no, mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Will not be
It's so
having any of
true.
that. It's
Yeah.
beautiful, but it's rough when you're doing the work. So if you have that Venus square Neptune, I'm on your team. I get it. It can be really good too, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially since squares make us move. That's like the 911 of the aspects. It's like, please do something. Our vitality is waning. Get it together.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. And so we come to Pluto. So Pluto represents our drive for evolutionary transformation of karmic and current life wounds. So with Pluto, we're carrying this buried material, all the intense feelings from prior lives, the fear, the rage, the pain, the shame. And I think of Pluto sometimes as this dragon that's sitting on top of a pot of gold. And if we're willing to be fearless and face those feelings and face those issues, we come to the pot of gold, which is true empowerment, an ability to be radically honest. And of course, we have our destiny signature in terms of our particular generation and what sign Pluto is in. But on that personal level, when we when we can activate our Pluto, we are truly empowered beings. And if Pluto is in relationship with Venus in our chart, at that evolved level, we will see our relationship as a vehicle for transformation and empowerment. And we will go to the depths. We'll be very spiritual, very psychological. We'll experience deep intimacy. We'll find that way to be radically honest, but still not hurtful, just be as truthful as we can be. And if we're not quite there, we're on that path toward there. We may find that our relationships are very intense. Friends might say, "Oh my God, you're in another relationship and it's so intense. Everybody you meet is always passionate and dramatic." And of course, if it's really on that lower side, we're dealing with people keying our cars and stalking us, and it's like it can be really very, very intense on the Venus Pluto level. And often when people are unfaithful related to Venus Pluto, it really does relate to a kind of a sexually addictive pattern, as opposed to Neptune, I love you, who you are on a soul level, or Uranus, I just need excitement, I just need change, or I thought you were going to leave me, so I ran out and found somebody else so I won't get hurt.
Mm.
But I find that the Venus Pluto requires uh, a pretty intense level of psychological exploration and depth to heal whatever is behind this. It's very soul centered. It's often connected to deep levels of abuse in this life or prior lives or within the family structure, the ancestral karma. Again, I'm very, very careful about looking at a chart and just being sure or thinking that I'm sure that I know what has happened to this person. But I do believe that when Venus and Pluto are engaged, especially in a hard aspect, that it will take some work to navigate that level of firepower.
Mm. Yep. Pluto gets together with anything, and you're going to need to get rigorously honest about what's living there, or it can just be such a hard engagement. It's like the ability to transform or rise from those ashes is in the honesty. That's a really big word. I feel like sometimes Pluto gets missed, is just that the honesty is there.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
And it's a beautiful level of honesty that is possible. And, we can compare it to Neptune, which is not so honest, right? With Neptune, there may be definite dishonesty, but often it's the illusion and delusion of both people. It's not always that they're deliberately lying. It's just that we don't always know the truth when we're in a Neptunian glamour.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
So I brought in Beyonce as a first example for this because, recently she, explored in her album that Jay-Z had been unfaithful to her. So I wanted to see where that was in her chart. And you see that she has a beautiful stellium in Libra, very connected to her artistry and her beauty and her musical abilities and the messages that she brings forth because it's in the third house. But there is that Pluto Venus conjunction there, and Jupiter adding emphasis, blowing it up, making it more expanded. And there is a sextile connection to Neptune. So it's not as intense as the squares, but it's certainly there. And not surprising that she decided to talk about it, right? She decided to make it, uh, you know, a message to people through her music that she had gone through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's a Sag. So I always think that's interesting.
What did you say about him? I didn't quite hear that.
He's a Sagittarius.
And there he is.
And there he
hmm
is. Yeah.
And you see that he has Venus Neptune conjunct, and he has Pluto Moon out of sign but conjunct, and Moon Uranus conjunct. And all of them, uh, I didn't put any extra lines on, but you can see the yod formation going to Saturn in Taurus in the eighth house. And my feeling about this was that, all these energies he carries have been very helpful and amazing for him to be successful. But I feel like this uh, unfaithfulness really takes him to his Saturn in the eighth house, his fundamental wounding, self-worth issues. Because when we come to Saturn, Saturn related to Venus will connect to how we don't feel good enough. We've got a strong inner critic. And so I can feel this like self-sabotage energy for
Mm-hmm.
him coming through this chart.
Mm-hmm. And I find anytime I see Scorpio and Sag towards the bottom, I'm like, let's talk about that male figure. What
Mm-hmm.
was the dynamic here in that? And then that he talks about that in his story as well, and the absence of that. And so how do I then become what I don't know how to be, what I didn't have the example for, which I think is so neat. And I do love to that he's a Virgo rising, because when I think about these two, and I've looked at their astrology plenty, I feel like the universe is funny. It's like, well, I'm going to just take this beautiful creature and put her right in your face, and you're going to answer all these questions. We're going to team player.
Uh-huh.
We're going to answer all of these questions.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
universal
and they and
humor.
they both have a lot of all of the planets merged together. And I often find, with the Venus Neptune in Scorpio signature, that these people really have a sense of intimacy and depth that they want from a romantic partner, which I almost feel other people who don't have that kind of signature can't really understand.
Sure.
I know I don't fully understand it. I will often myself look at their relationships and think, wow, they seem plenty deep enough. They seem intense, intimate, romantic, bonded. And yet for them, there's like a longing of some level of depth that is very scorpionic, right? It's like when you have a client who's strongly Scorpio coming for a reading, and at the end, they want to know what you've hidden from them and what you didn't
Yeah.
tell them, right?
Yes. Well, and it's
And that
interesting.
comes through.
It does. It's interesting if you watch their dynamic as well in public, especially after they've done some of this work together. There's no real Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? If you're talking to one, you're talking to the other. And it is they meld their
Mhm,
worlds just together in what they do. And
mhm.
I think that it's fascinating to see how it's done that way. Because you watch another interview and it's like, oh yeah, I'm married to so and so. And these two are like, well, you're getting both of us today, even if one of us is showing up. So very cool.
Uh-huh.
Mm, but
Yeah,
intense.
very powerful.
Mm. Yeah. Do we have any Venus Pluto people out there? Oh, we've got Venus quincunx Pluto and trine. Hmm.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. So here we have Ellen DeGeneres. Um, I pulled up her chart a while ago when there were rumors that she had a fight with Portia in a restaurant that was quite visible, and uh, just sort of questioning what her relationship nature would be. And of course now there's the big scandal about how she treats people and how she has been
Sure.
mean to people on her show and has created a culture of abuse. So you can see that this is a very intense chart around relationship. Um, Venus in Aquarius retrograde, conjunct the Sun, opposite Uranus, quincunx Pluto, square to Jupiter and Neptune on the North Node, uh, a moon in Aries. So there's quite a lot for her to process in this life, to be in a relationship where she would be nurturing, caring, um, and not kind of triggered to some of these more challenging possibilities.
Yeah, and we just on Monday, when Kathy Rose was over, looked over the Uranian solar arc to her moon, and it was like, time to talk about relationships. We're
Mm,
gonna do some relationship work here, right? Always. So it's interesting to see her Venus signature here in the timing of what she's experiencing right now, because this is tough, but it's good work also.
hmm
Mm,
Yeah, because if with anybody who has a south node in Taurus, there can be a tendency to stay sort of comfy, right, and secure in old patterns. And she's drawn towards Scorpio. And if one doesn't actively go there with enough depth and transformation and empowerment, a life event will slap you and bring you into that intensity and
sure.
into ruthless honesty.
Mm.
So my sense is that this is her time period. This is her wake up call.
Yeah, and it's not as like a punishment. That's the thing I continue to think of is, if you're going through this, you got a lot of things going on in your life out there. The universe is not punishing you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes though, this universal body has got to turn up the volume a little bit so that we'll get busy doing the work that's right in front of us in this time period, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just it. I think this is just the event that is happening because maybe the whisper couldn't have been heard, and that is not always through fault of our own, I don't believe.
No, no. I mean, as we all know, we do our best, and if we don't hear those whispers and clues, then something happens that takes us to the next level.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's a question real quick before we look at Wilt's chart.
Hmm.
When you're considering a Venus signature, do you consider semi-sextiles as well?
Yes, I will. I will look at a semi-sextile if it's very, very tight, uh, and yeah, but it's not first on my list. No.
Okay, cool. Wilt,
Okay.
20,000 women.
Yeah. So yes, Wilt said that he had slept with 20,000 women. So I thought, well, we should look at his chart. This says because those are some numbers, and
No.
and you can see how intense this is. That Venus is conjunct Jupiter. I'm sorry, conjunct Neptune. It's in a square to Jupiter. The moon is in a square to Pluto, and Venus is in a trine to Uranus and opposition to Saturn. So, really, all of the outer planets to both Moon and Venus in a multiple level. And we also have the Venus in the fifth house of romance. So,
So a
it's just
couple
that,
things.
yeah, it's you know, and you add that to the fact that he is in a position of success, right, as a professional athlete where there's lots of opportunities that, you know, other people might not have.
Sure.
And you can see just how this expressed itself as, you know, just a tremendous amount of sex.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I never underestimate a really comfortable Jupiter, right? He's like, oh, let me just stretch out. Let me just stretch out over here on all of you in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How do you feel like the Saturn is really putting the influence being there in Pisces? Especially his is retrograde.
Yeah, yeah, Saturn retrograde, and it's opposite the Venus Neptune. And again, I feel it as a self-worth issue that is motivating the Venus Neptune and sort of that endless glamorization of the romantic interludes. Um,
Hmm,
yeah, that was just my take on it. Um,
sure. Well,
But
not,
I don't think he ever really changed, you know, from what I understand. I don't remember that he decided to settle down.
yeah. Wow. And it's like, I think about Neptune trying to dissolve those earthy, although mutable boundaries of Virgo, but then Saturn's up being dissolved in Pisces. It's like, what is real here?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Wilt.
um,
Oh, I feel like in
okay.
another life, I really was probably married to this guy. Like, or at least he was like, I had a big crush on him in like third grade or something.
Yeah, yeah. He's a very interesting person, and I brought him in because it's a little bit different, and also because I wanted to point out something about his relationship with Angelina Jolie. And so I don't look at his chart and think of this as being a huge chart around the Venus outer planet signatures. The Venus is fairly well grounded with the Moon, Mercury, South Node, and Mars. Maybe because that stellium is in the second house, I think of planets in the second house, excuse me, that have some self-worth issues that have to be dealt with to come into their full power. But you know, he's a person that I would expect would take his duties and responsibilities in marriage and in family fairly seriously from a core level, and that he's working on opening his heart through the vehicle of relationship with the North Node in Cancer. And I often think of people who have Cancer on the eighth house as people who are um, wanting, whether they get it or not, but wanting to mate for life, wanting something that has longevity and security and fills the soul. But he does have Neptune in a square to Saturn, and Saturn is the dispositor of all of the planets. And so my feeling was that he would be mostly a faithful guy, but when he met Angelina, for some reason, he just couldn't resist, right? Something wasn't working in his relationship with Jennifer Aniston, and he fell in love. It was soul-centered connection, and just felt like he had to do it. And if you look at uh, his relationship houses, this is what I want you to see. His fourth house is ruled by Pisces, fifth house ruled by Aries, seventh by Gemini, and eighth by Cancer. And then you come into her chart, and she has Neptune opposite the sun, so it's a Pisces-like flavor that matches his fourth house. She has Moon, Jupiter, and Mars in Aries. That's his ideal romantic partner. Zip goes right into the fifth. Then South Node, Sun, and Mercury in Gemini, and that takes us into his seventh house. And Saturn, Venus, and Ascendant in Cancer that she has, it takes us into his eighth. So she was like the spitting image of his ideal partner. All the just the that those basic relationship just really tells you how much the signs can be important. So I wanted to make that point that
Mm,
yes, I'm very much looking at Venus and the outer planets, but I also pay attention to the relationship houses and what's going on with them and what a person is looking for at the deeper levels to feel like they are in their relationship learning growing mold, and that that person is what they are aspiring to.
yeah. It was
And then of
interesting.
course,
Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to
Oh, I
say,
was going to say with her chart, Pluto opposite the Moon and the Aries stellium, and Venus squaring Uranus. So she definitely has that capability in there by the astrology to be someone who could, um, shift and change quickly from one relationship to another.
yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting because I look at people just in their, outside of their charts, but just looking at them together and watching them, every time I would see them in an appearance together, I'm like, this is so electric and not sustainable. But there is work happening in this electricity, just watching them, as opposed to looking at photos and interactions of he and Jennifer. It was almost that sense of longing from him, like, you could be it. You will fulfill my north node, but not in the way that I'm going to choose. Like just
Mm-hmm.
watching them, because even as they have shown things, even recently in photos of those two together, there is just that, yeah, between those two. And with he and Angelina still, it's like there is still just some electricity there that's not sexual. It's just the electricity of work, of purpose, I think, being there. It's really interesting, at least how I'm seeing it. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Mm,
Yeah. No,
mm,
I agree with you. There was a it was
mm.
subtle, and I do come to Jen's chart in a moment. So
Oh,
we'll come to her because yeah, they had a very different vibrational feel.
yeah.
So in the past, I didn't really include Saturn, although I think of it myself, obviously, but I thought I'd just add that in because people with Saturn Venus contacts always want to know. People with Venus in Capricorn want to know. So if you bring the energy of Saturn, which is about accomplishment and mastery, a great work, development of self discipline and self reliance and self respect, all the selves. Bringing Saturn with Venus brings in this whole nother energy where at its best, we're talking about relationship mastery, the capacity to commit. The relationship may support business endeavors together. I often find people with strong Venus, Saturn really want to choose somebody they think is going to be successful. Uh, I don't have Venus, Saturn in my in my chart at all, and I do have, I will, say I have Venus opposite Neptune on the ascendant descendant axis in a T square to Uranus on the south node at the IC. And I have Pluto, Mars, and Venus in a grand trine, so that I have all of those connections, all of the three transpersonal planets in an intense relationship with my Venus. But I have Saturn in the seventh house,
Mm,
but it never played out for me as this idea of, oh, can I find someone successful or can I find someone for the long term? It's like that wasn't even in my mind without an aspect of Venus and Saturn. And
mm,
strong Venus Saturn people, are really usually looking for something that they feel is solid and buildable and maybe so discerning that it takes them time to commit. They've got really high standards and they feel blocked, trying to find the perfect one to satisfy Saturn. And that's really where I see Jen, even though it's not totally exact on every level. You can see that she has Saturn trine the moon and Pluto square the moon. And I feel like that is her strongest relationship challenge. But having Venus on the North Node, evolutionary wise, indicates that you longed for relationship, that was something you couldn't have. And a South Node in the 12th house will often indicate lives of being in retreat, spiritual lives, being away from things. And so she's coming into this life learning about relationship. And I would translate that Saturn as part of the stellium. And even though it's not exactly conjunct, Venus, it's far away even for me to include that way. But in a stellium, I'll include it. And so I feel that for her, there is the longing for that strong, solid partnership. She's coming from South Node in Libra, where she's naturally given to relationship and collaboration and caring. And so I'm hoping that she finds a relationship that gives her the stability that she's looking for.
Which I gotta tell you, just in my heart of hearts and watching the two of them together, I'm like, whether or not they actually get back together, I think that they are each other's person. And
Mm-hmm.
I wondered at the time that all of this went down, and she very Libra-esque handled herself. And I get that because you're going to be graceful in public, right? And I thought at the time, what is it in you that is stopping you from your fight? Why are you not opening your mouth and saying, that is mine, I want it? And once I saw her chart, I'm like, "Oh, you didn't know how to do that yet. You are you're
No.
you're growing into that. That was the last thing you were going to do, you know? So it's interesting too, though, in like I said, some of what I've seen in their current interaction, she's a little bit more vocal with him and gets his attention. So it's so neat to see that. So I think whether they get together again ever or not, they are each
Mm-hmm.
other's peoples. Kind of neat.
I would agree. I would definitely agree with that. They're bonded at a soul level.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, these two. Yes.
I don't know how we're doing on time, if we're still okay to talk about a few more things, but
Oh, we
yeah,
are. We
these
are.
guys are really topical, right? And they keep saying that they don't have an open relationship, but they've got all these signals and things they've said in interviews over the lines that sure sounded like they had an open relationship. And so we know that. Let's see if I go forward. Yeah, we'll go to Jada's chart. That she supposedly had this relationship with August Alsina. Um, anyway, I just thought I would throw them up that we could talk about them and look at uh, their connections. And they both have that stellium energy where the energies are blended and merged. It's
Mhm.
like the Pluto and the Venus and the Uranus and the moon, and they're all together and they're hanging out. And of course, for her, they're in sextile to Neptune and Jupiter. That's a lot of relationship signature with Venus and the moon connected to the outer planets. And yet, I could also feel her, Saturn in the seventh house, that responsibility and that commitment to the marriage. We go back to him. He's got the stellium starting in Virgo, going through Libra and Scorpio. The Neptune right with the moon, connected to the Venus. So there's the desire for soul-centered relationship and power and intensity for both of them. Uh, he's building toward having freedom. He needs to have freedom, even though he's so relationship focused. What do you think about them, Stormie?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was actually thinking about um, his nodes, watching that Aries node, watching someone develop into an Aries node, and the outward expression is interesting because even when they did this last red table that got him in the entanglement meme, um, if you watch how he deals with her, it's very Libra-esque, and then it builds up, and he lives that north node, and he said, I'm angry at you, right? It's that moment. And from there, though, the rest of the interview gets different. And it's like,
Mm.
yes, all of the North Node and Aries, can you just please tell people you're mad at them? Like, just say it. Because then you're going to be able to kind of move and get on with it, in that way. So I think that's interesting. The other thing I was just kind of tapping in with her is in her relationship with him, having that Taurus descendant. She doesn't wish to be away from him. But
Mhm.
I do think if the physical things changed or there was the distance, this is how we got into an entanglement, right?
Yes, yes.
Right.
And she needs that because with the South Node in Leo in the ninth house, image is really big for her and how it looks out in the world. And you know, she's got Mars on the North Node and in Aquarius, and so she also needs freedom.
Mhm.
So you know, whether it's an occasional entanglement or they actually really had some level of open relationship that they just don't want to talk about, they need space. You know, I can see that they're drawn to connection, but they also need space.
Which is interesting too, because in the energetic sense, I think it was gonna be her side that was gonna have the entanglement. He's had some pictures with some other women, right? But in the one that was gonna cause real impact into their relationship, as soon as she did it, I think that it was gonna be like boom, and
Hmm.
not just because she's the woman, but even just looking at their energetic imprints with each other, I'm like, oh yeah, he can go be pictured in different places, but I think he was the one who's going to essentially be wounded when something really happened, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Yes. How fast, so funny. People are like cheersing. They were like, we have time. Let's talk about it.
So anyway, and I threw Elizabeth Taylor in here because I don't know, maybe some of the younger people don't even know who she is, but she was married 8 times, twice to Richard Burton, another famous actor. And she has another sort of classic chart where everything is connected. You know, Venus, Uranus, so that fast relationships and all that Pisces, and
Mhm.
Pluto square to Venus, Uranus. There was quite a lot of, you know, upheaval and fighting in her relationship with Richard Burton, and a trine to the moon in Scorpio. And then, of course, Neptune engaged by opposition to all the Pisces planets. So, you know, her capacity to feel that soul-centered love and be in a volatile relationship and be learning and growing from it. And it took her quite a long time before her life settled down, and she did channel a lot of her energy towards philanthropic activities and, you know, just being a good, loving, heart-centered person. She put a lot of time, energy, and money into the HIV fight.
Yeah.
So she was classic, you know, kind of in the early days before celebrities talked so much about their relationships, right? You know, there was a lot more hidden and a lot more PR back then, and but she couldn't hide it because she married everybody.
Yeah. I mean, even in her presence, if you just even look and sit with her pictures, to me, she always feels like an illusion. Like I'm like, what's happening here? What am I really seeing? It's this in between the worlds kind of vibe. And then you get to actually see the chart energy. And I'm telling you what, that Venus Neptune is no joke. You're gonna really find the value work in there, but with people, right? We're going to do that with people because I have to know my own value, but I can't know it on my own. It's easy
Mhm.
to chant by yourself and feel really good about you. But when you engage other people, that's when I think we get to figure it out. But this is a lot of in between the worlds kind of energy here. And sometimes I think when there's high Pisces or strong Pisces or Neptunian placements, you got to do a couple delusional sunsets before you get it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
something I'd like to just say to everybody is that if you have these signatures, trust that you're going to go into some really intense, gnarly relationships in the early part of your life, and that you're learning and growing and finding out who you are. And it's the healing and integration process that happens that keeps taking you to the higher and higher frequencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm.
So you know, just closing up here, just want to say that as you transform, as you do the therapy, do 12-step groups, energy healing, whatever feels right for you, and you channel this energy into non-relationship strategies, this balances the energy. As I said, it siphons it off, And it helps transform the world, because really these outer planets are about world healing, world transformation. So if you have these relationship patterns and you focus on whatever organization or group or calling is calling to your heart, it will also help your relationships.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you,
I'm
man.
just going to go through these slides without talking, but just so if you're watching this recording, you can just see these slides. Gives you very specific strategies for each one, and the way that you can, take these gifts you have and work with them to build not only better relationship patterns yourself, but a whole new world.
Mm-hmm. And you have this beautiful book that is ready for us,
That
right?
my book was published in 2016, Soul Pathway, The Dance of Astrology, Intuition, and Spiritual Awakening. It includes a certain amount of astrology to understand your soul path, plus how to connect spiritually, how to connect to your intuition, how to do deep healing work, and live a spiritually conscious path. And I am now the president of OPA, Organization for Professional Astrology. Hey, and we have major events. We certify astrologers. We have a peer group process, 3-day training, all online now, so that you can work with other people who are astrologers and become more professional. And consulting skills, which is all about the ethics and how to work with astrology in a healing way. And I have my own school, Soul Path School, and I teach evolutionary astrology, intuition, and psychosynthesis. So more classes are starting up in September again.
Yep. So if Kay is your teacher, if you feel that call, here is where to find her. And I'll also make sure this information's in the description box down below. And I just wanted to share with you, it's like I'm so grateful that you came to talk, because we can really take all of the challenge of growing in relationships and turn it into something. And I know that because I built an entire practice out of it. I said, I don't choose you. I choose this person over here and we're going to build a life. But I took all of that and built a practice that is beaming. So that is definitely useful.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much for coming over today. Still cheers in the comment section. So also good. I feel like people were able to vibe in with what we were doing. So thank you, Kay, so much for coming over.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Stormy. I look forward to seeing you again sometime.
Yeah, God knows what we'll run into next. Maybe someone else will have a different entanglement, and we can we can look through and talk through that. And I will also put information in the description box down below, you guys, for OPA if you want to join and find out more information about that as well. All right, you guys, we will see you in the next Eat and Greet, which will actually be next week. We'll have Susan Miller here, and we're going to talk about the Saturn and Uranus square coming up in 2021. So we look forward to seeing you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.